Get started. My name is Clouded. Welcome to my Tears of the Kingdom any percent PB analysis / commentary. We'll be going into a bit of depth here on my personal best run that was performed not too long ago. First off, we'll go ahead and note that we are playing on version 1.0 of the game, as we saw there on the home menu, which is required to show for verification purposes. Version 1.0 is the initial release version of the game from when it first launched back in May. And the reason we use it, obviously, because it's the fastest version due to the number of glitches and tricks that are only available or work slightly better for us on that version. So as we press new game here and we load into the somewhat lengthy intro sequence of the game here, we're going to immediately show off the power of version 1.0 and its broken glitches. Normally the game wants you to run through this segment that takes about 2.5 minutes long, where you talk to Zelda, go through several cutscenes and dialogue. However, we are going to immediately just run right past her and jump up on the wall to try to perform a precise clip to make it out of bounds here. Now, this clip was discovered pretty soon after the game's release. I've got a pretty good visual cue for it here. This one is actually a bit of a newer setup that we've been using, so it's not quite super well tested yet, but it seems to work as we hit that clip first try. And now we're going to make another tight jump here at a precise angle to skip another cutscene trigger before we head directly into another jump here using these backwards jump slashes that will allow us to kind of continue our momentum forward. And for the rest of the sequence here, those are the hardest parts right there. We're just going to basically climb down a little bit to avoid more of these cutscene and dialogue triggers here. This one's a bit finicky, but we managed to get on. We'll do 5 side hops left here and then a 6th jump up to the left. Let our stamina regain a little bit before we continue down. And this clip right here is only performable on version 1.0 of the game, which is a huge reason of why we use it. It's easily up to a minute time save if executed well. And now we're going to see these jump slash chains again here as we head to the cutscene trigger that'll send us into the rest of the game and out of the intro portion. So what's coming up next here is a pretty long 3.5-4 minute cutscene called the Upheaval cutscene. And you might heard this referred to as the bane of Tears of the Kingdom speedrunners' existence. It's something that's been up for debate for quite a while in the community. So back closer to launch, there was actually a community vote to have the option to skip this cutscene and start from a save file that opened when Link wakes up on the Great Sky Island, which we'll see is the tutorial portion of the game. And the vote did actually pass, so there is the option, if you want to start a speedrun of pretty much any category from that save file at the beginning of the tutorial instead of having to go through the intro and this lengthy cutscene. However, it turns out less than a week after that vote was passed is when that intro clip was discovered by some of our amazing glitch hunters in the community. And so it turns out, well, even though we had a timer offset of about 6.5 minutes added to the start of the run, being able to shave a full minute off of that is just too tempting to pass up. So we're back to performing that intro clip that we just saw and watching this cutscene every time. That's just one of the many unique perks of version 1.0 that we're going to be showing off throughout this run. Just to give a little bit more general background info about version 1.0, we do gain access to a lot of tricks and glitches like mentioned, but we also kind of have a bit of a trade-off as version 1.0 does have some slight performance issues. Some areas might be a little laggier or skip frames here and there throughout the game, as we might see. But overall, it's not that big of an issue enough to the point where we would want to run on later versions optimally. But that being said, if you go look on the leaderboards we have on speedrun.com/TotK for our page there, you'll notice that we actually have each category divided up into 5 separate tabs for each of the versions that were released for the game. So no matter what version you're playing on, even if it's not technically the fastest possible, there is that accessibility option available for anyone. And each version actually has a pretty unique route due to the glitches that are available that were patched out. So if that's something you're interested in getting into running Tears of the Kingdom, I definitely recommend checking out some of the top runs for each of the versions or the version that you are playing on to see if that's something that might interest you. But going back to version 1.0, talking about some of those changes that were made, obviously we saw there were some interesting issues with the geometry and collision of walls and ceilings and such. That first of all, that's what allows us to perform the clip that we saw earlier in the intersection. But also, if you play on version 1.0, you'll notice that Link can actually climb quite a bit higher on top of like a concave ceiling or something before falling down. So just interesting little things like that. But there are trade-offs as well. Like for some reason, climbing ladders is a lot slower on version 1.0 for some reason. Thankfully, the only ladder that we had to climb in the route is no longer there, so we don't have to worry about that. Something else interesting, if you're familiar with Breath of the Wild speedruns, an interesting glitch they had known as skew that was pretty much of a linchpin for that run, actually carried over in a small form to Tears of the Kingdom. It's not nearly as useful as in Breath of the Wild. Basically, what it does is it allows us to like store the angle of a shield jump that we can use for a launch later on. We were looking into a bunch of different ways to use that, but turns out it's actually not useful and it's something we end up wanting to avoid. And just the game can just be a lot more volatile overall in terms of dealing with fire or explosives or things like that, as we will definitely see later. So now here we've got a long load before we head into the Room of Awakening to finally begin the Great Sky Island tutorial section. And we're going to pick up our first item in the run, which is the Decayed Master Sword. This is a key item that we're basically forced to grab. We have not been able to find a way to skip this yet. And it ends up being pretty useful for this next section we'll see here, as we will get the item pickup and a tutorial box, and then we'll be cutting these vines in front of us so we can make our way out. Now, just to explain a little bit here, normally you can see that terminal in the background right there. The game wants us to activate it and go through this lengthy 45-second long cutscene to where the gears start turning and the doors open. However, we're going to be skipping all that with a precise jump known as cog skip. Here, we're going to be lining up on the cog and using a very interesting bit of slope right here to make a precise jump and another backslash before we make it up onto this wall where we can actually skip the whole section and head out into this tunnel that we're not supposed to be accessing until quite a bit later in the game, towards the end of the tutorial section. But we can actually use this trick here, and I was pretty lucky to get it first try there. It can be a very finicky jump, but we'll pass right here. You can't see it on screen, but just to the right of us is the 4th shrine on the Great Sky Island that we will be returning to later. But this will allow us to head outside early and grab the second main item that we're going to be looking for in the game here, which is going to be incredibly useful for not only the tutorial section, but for pretty much the entire rest of the run. And that is one of the new Zonai devices that was introduced to the game. As we're going to see here, we grab this chest up here, and it's going to give us 3 wings. And now these wings are going to be incredibly crucial, as we'll see. First of all, we're going to duplicate these wings using a quick glitch here, where if you select the item basically to pull it out of the inventory, and you sort the inventory and then close it at the same time, it'll trick the game into actually duplicating the item for you. So there you can just see we went from 3 wings to 10 within the snap of a finger. And that's something that we're going to see later on for other items in the game here. So now we've got this about 1 minute long cutscene of the title dive, where we're going to basically get a nice pan of all the beautiful new sky regions that were added into Tears of the Kingdom from before. And we're going to be seeing the title card splash up on the screen. Now our next objective is going to be to head down there and grab the Pura Pad, which is our next key item, basically replacing the Sheikah slate from Breath of the Wild as kind of our inventory interface sort of thing. But we've actually got a few things that we want to grab before then along the way. This whole tutorial section here, the first half, we're going to spend pretty much material gathering to allow us to perform a very unique and broken glitch known as arrow smuggle, which we'll definitely get into way more later on. But here we need a precise number of items for that glitch. The first of which being 3 tree branches. So we'll grab our first one here, our second one later on. And using these items is going to allow us to perform this glitch where we can basically activate a state known as arrow smuggle, which will allow us to perform in pretty much an incredible amount of glitches and skips here, such as flying across the map, clipping out of bounds, gaining infinite height. So that's something to look forward to later on in the run in about 10 minutes from now. So here we've got this dialogue and cutscene with this construct here, who's going to give us the Pura Pad. And this is actually another item that we have not been able to find out how to skip quite yet. There actually is a void out plane just below this island that we're standing on, which won't allow you to leave from this location until you grab the Pura Pad. And even if it were possible to skip it, we still have another issue later on when we have to fast travel. I mentioned that shrine that we ran past earlier. It's way up high in the sky. We have no way to efficiently get there, at least faster than a 30-second loading screen from fast travel. And as far as we know, the per pad is required to unlock that. So even if we were able to skip this void out plane here, it still is yet to remain determined if we would even be able to get up there fast enough for it to be worth it. So here we're going to be using the first of our wings, and from now on, we're basically playing a game of the floor is lava. So our next objective there, besides find Princess Zelda, of course, which is our main objective of the game, we're going to be heading to the door to activate the door of the Temple of Time, which will allow us to enter the shrines. Unlike Breath of the Wild, where you could just clip in and activate the loading zone, the loading zones for the shrines are not active in Tears of the Kingdom until you open the door of the Temple of Time and actually open the terminal on the shrine itself. So this is unfortunately something else we have to work through. But we're going to be playing a game of the floor is lava here, trying not to touch the ground, because if we can keep Link's last grounded state as the Purapad Island up there, we'll be able to jump back right up there very quickly. And we're going to grab the next of our key items here, a wooden shield. This is going to be incredibly useful. We're going to grab a second one later on. This is our first. And also that rusty sword we saw there, that's going to be another weapon that we need. So we're performing these jumps here, basically making a bridge of wings all the way to the door, and we're going to activate the terminal. And if everything went correctly, the game should place us on a wing after the cutscene, so then we can basically just jump off the cliff, supposedly to our deaths, but really we'll just void out. And if we did everything correctly, the game will send us right back up to the Purapad Island right next to that construct where we just jumped off. So let's see if we got it here. And we did. Awesome. So next here, you can see the first shrine that we'll be heading to, Ascend, up there on the mountaintop. We're going to come here and perform another wing drop. We do this by lining up to a backflip into a dive, drop the wing, and then a quick jump slash to get on the wing. This is especially useful when you want to maintain height while still getting on a wing. Another thing that we can just see that tutorial prompt up there telling us that we need to find warmth soon or we'll take damage. Well, the first part will not be true. We won't find warmth soon, but we definitely will take damage. So we're going to need to be very quick at going through this area, as we already took a full damage of heart from that void out, and then another half from the damage right there. But running through this cave here, we're going to be grabbing our next incredibly broken item for the run, which is the bomb flower. Once we have access to the fuse rune, we'll be able to use this to perform some cool tricks. And this bomb is also going to help us unlock some areas later on. So we'll grab 4 on the way through this cave, ignoring Mr. Like right there. And you can see this little trick I'm performing where I basically kind of crouch and pull out my sword and put it away. This is what's known as crouch tap throw sprinting, or crouch throw sprinting. Unfortunately, the beloved whistle sprinting from Breath of the Wild was patched out, and this is kind of our we have whistle sprinting at home equivalent for Tears of the Kingdom. It's not quite as great, but it does allow us to preserve stamina, which as you can see is pretty important because we're going to need every last drop of this stamina here to make quick work of this climb up the cliff here. And if we do it right and we were fast enough, we can get to the shrine and inside just before we die. So there we go. We made it to the terminal with 1 heart left. And I think actually we're probably going to take one more tick of damage. So I think we'll actually be entering this right with just half a heart. So we'll need to be extra careful once we get inside, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue for us. As the Ascend Shrine, the first one that we're going to be here, it's on a cycle due to a moving platform that goes back and forth at the top. So we actually are on kind of a limit right now in terms of how fast we can go through this shrine. However, it's not really that big of a deal because we can use it to pick up 1 more of the key items that we'll need for the air smuggle glitch later on. And then we're going to start duplicating those bombs that we grabbed. So you'll see here we're getting the first of our 4 main abilities added to Tears of the Kingdom, which is Ascend. And if I had to rank the 4 main ones in terms of their use for the speedrun, Ascend would probably be 3rd out of 4th. I'd say it's not terribly useful. We mostly just use it inside the shrine here as it's required to solve the puzzles with basically no items that we have right now. We're not going to be able to scale the wall with a tree branch. Sadly, that's kind of a limit that we have right now. But we will be using it a couple places later on to help us get quickly to our destination. So you see here, yeah, it looks like we did take that extra tick of damage, so we're stuck at half a heart here. Thankfully, there's not very much that can kill us. There's just this one construct. We made short work of his buddy in front of Temple of Time earlier, and unfortunately he's going to be joining his buddy in the robot afterlife because we're going to need that wooden bow that he's got there as the first of two that we need to perform our arrow smuggle setup later on. So we're going to make short work of these wires here as well to activate this platform and head up. And as we mentioned, you'll see this moving platform above here that basically we have to wait. The cycle's pretty tight if you're running to grab the bow and everything, so you want to make sure you're quick. But since we have the downtime here where we're basically just standing around, we're going to do a shield jump and duplicate these bombs here. That's another quirk of version 1.0 like we were talking about. Duping bombs is incredibly volatile. If you try to do more than 2 at once on flat ground, there's a very high chance that you're going to explode. And with our only measly half heart of damage, we're not going to be able to tank, half heart of life, we're not going to be able to tank that. So we'll just be very quick there and try to be careful with those bombs. So now we're going to sit through about another minute long cutscene as they introduce us to the Light of Blessing, which we're going to need 4 of in total to get off the tutorial island here and head to the end of the game. So we'll go ahead and just sit through this cutscene. We do have a little bit of more time that we'll have to go through the cold area before we fully make it out, but thankfully the Light of Blessing, just like in Breath of the Wild with the Spirit Orbs, you can see it refills our health right there. So we'll be good to go. We'll be able to tank that damage as long as we don't do anything dumb and accidentally hurt ourselves on the way down. But we'll just see this cutscene finish off here and then another loading screen to head back outside before we continue to our next shrine, which is going to be Fuse. Which personally I consider, and I think a lot of runners would consider to be the #1 most useful of the 4 abilities, and we'll definitely get into that once we get closer to the shrine. But our first objective here, after a little dialogue with Raru here, and another tutorial box, we're going to be heading down to do another wing drop, so we'll be using another wing here. This one will be a little bit easier than the backflip dive method that I showed off earlier. We're just going to do a quick shield hop here, surf down, use that momentum to carry us forward, shield jump right onto the wing. It's a little bit tricky, the timing on that, so you don't take damage, but we are able to make it. And since we've got downtime on the wing here, we're going to be, just like that moving platform before, we want to use this time efficiently instead of just sitting around and kind of waiting. So you saw we got in a bomb dupe there. Usually I hope to get 2 there. Unfortunately, I kind of side hopped a little bit and had to level out quicker, so I wasn't able to get in a second one, but we'll go for another one here. Got it. And you'll see one of the bombs actually fell off, but that's okay. We should be able to recover this. And I was a little bit too high, so I had to perform a quick fall damage cancel there by canceling the shield menu. So a couple extra dupes there. We need to talk to this construct because he'll give us the energy cell. Now, if you remember from a casual playthrough, the energy cell is incredibly useful for activating Zonai devices and just using all the cool machines that you can build throughout the game. We actually are not going to be using any of those. We never see the battery get used once in the current any percent speedrun. However, the reason we get it there is because if we don't get it from the construct there, we are forced to get it after we finish the next shrine in an incredibly long cutscene. So we would lose about 20 to 30 seconds if we waited for that instead. Now we're going to grab another incredibly broken item, which is the ruby. If you remember from Breath of the Wild, basically the gems you can mostly just sell them for cash. They're not really that useful. But in Tears of the Kingdom, oh boy, these are basically hand grenades, or more appropriately hand nukes that we're going to be using to take care of some tough enemies later on. So we're going to grab that ruby there. And right here, we're going to head to Fuse Shrine. This is going to be our last use of the Ascend ability, hopefully, in case we make any mistakes and need to back up later. But this strat here of doing a wing drop and ascending from underneath Fuse is actually my personal idea that I contributed to this route. So I'm pretty proud of that, except for when I missed a strat and I end up falling off the wing. Then it feels a little bit awkward. But there's our last tree branch there. So we've got almost every item, just one more we need for our arrow smuggle setup as we enter into the Fuse Shrine here. So while we have a little bit of downtime, I'm going to go ahead and give a brief overview of how this overload arrow smuggle setup works, because it's a bit lengthy and in-depth to explain, but hopefully this all makes sense. So basically, we want to smuggle our bow and arrow, and the way we do that is by overloading the game memory, and we accomplish this, all those items that we grabbed. Basically, there's a precise setup we can do where if you drop enough items from your inventory at once, you can basically trick the game into thinking they've left your inventory, but since there's not enough room to drop them, since there's so many items kind of occupying the same space, basically the game will basically glue it to Link's body, and so that will eventually overload the memory. And in that state, if you drop a weapon, it will actually smuggle the weapon, basically, so it'll be like invisible. And this will allow us to perform, like I mentioned, a number of cool tricks. So now that we finally have fuse, we can perform these cool bomb jumps that we'll be seeing quite a few of throughout the run. And here's our last item. So now we have 2 wooden shields, 2 wooden bows, and 4 weapons. There you can see another great use of fuse there to shoot the chest down. Unfortunately, I got an unlucky bounce. Sometimes we can get the chest to fly complete in the opposite direction of where we're going. And you'll notice I'm draining my arrows here too. I can definitely explain this in a bit. But we basically just need 1 arrow left to perform the overload setup, and then once that's done, we're going to drain that one as well. Because when we're in a state where we don't have any arrows, and Link can't enter bullet time, which is that slow motion cool zoom effect you get. So here we're going to perform the Zuggle overload setup here by dropping all these weapons like I described. And once you've dropped them all, you got to quickly pause and unpause so the game doesn't have a chance to drop it, and then drop the remaining ones. So we're going to need to do 3 cycles of this with all our gear, and if we get it perfectly, then we'll have a quick setup for our arrow smuggle. And like I mentioned, having no arrows and not being able to enter bullet time will allow us to chain, basically bow draws and jump slashes to fly through the air. So we're going to use these bomb shields here to give us momentum. As we launch over here, quick switch to another bomb shield, another launch, and now we can basically fly through the air. The purpose of this one right here, not only is it just faster than running in general, but we're trying to avoid a cutscene trigger for this construct captain down below. That's about a 10-second time saver, so I don't think I hit it. I think I was a bit too low. Yeah, we got the cutscene there. Unfortunately, that's going to be about a 10-second time loss for the run. But even still, missing the cutscene skip, we're still saving time over running and having to bomb the wall. And so that's Fuse Shrine. that was a bit of a lengthy explanation for everything that we're going to have to go through here. But as you'll see, we've got this arrow smuggle state active for the entire rest of the run, unless we load a save or die. So we're going to try to avoid those things, of course. And you'll notice that we ended up fusing the bow to one of our weapons as well. That's basically to keep it from unloading and carry it with us, so we can keep arrow smuggle state active. All right, this next part here is actually right off the bat. After that cutscene skip, we have what's I consider to be the toughest arrow flight setup in the whole run. So we're going to perform a precise jump off this ledge here to head all the way to the next shrine, which is Ultra Hand. So we're going to angle up here, and normally during a run, I'm going to be staying quiet for this part because I've got to focus and concentrate. It's pretty easy to miss one of the inputs here, and if you do, Link will do a jump slash, and he'll basically lose all his momentum and fall straight down. So you really got to be careful during these parts. I know some runners even use a metronome to kind of time their beats here. Another thing we have to deal with, I think we mentioned earlier about the performance issues of version 1.0. That's another thing here. This area can be very laggy as you fly over that lake with all the water particles, and there you can see the clouds. That adds a lot of lag. So we have a few lag spike areas here, but fortunately, even with the lag, we were able to avoid that and make a clean flight all the way to Ultra Hand Shrine. That one I was pretty proud of pulling that one off. So inside the shrine here, we're going to see yet another example of arrow flight. Pretty much everything we're going to be doing for the rest of the game. Minimal running, just flying through the air as fast as possible with various setups. Okay, let's continue our trend of ranking the abilities. Ultra Hand is definitely last. It's not very useful, which is kind of funny because in a casual playthrough, you might consider it to be one of the most useful of Link's 4 main abilities to build all these cool creations and such. But in the speedrun, we don't really have much time to be building things, so we're going to hopefully not be having to use this. There is one spot where we may have to use it as a little bit of a backup, but if that happens, we'll get to it. But otherwise than that one spot, Ultra Hand is not used through the entire run, actually. So instead of building these bridges here to get across, we're going to do a lineup to perform what we call a ledge bomb off this board. You can see we barely hit the edge of the board there, which is going to give us a nice launch angle. so we can perform arrow flight to just basically shoot straight to the end of the shrine. And that launch angle was pretty good. It could have been a little bit better, but I'm definitely very happy with this one. And just like that, we are at the end of Ultra Hand Shrine. So from here on out, we have our 3 out of 4 Light of Blessings. We're going to head back to the Temple of Time now to get the last of the 4 abilities, which is Recall, that we need to finish the Gray Sky Island. Unfortunately, we don't really have a way to skip doing this or get it through on the first visit. Like, say the first time we went to the Temple of Time, even if we can clip through the door there, we won't be able to get the ability, and we won't be able to open the final door at the end to leave. So this is a setup that we have to go through for now. But here we've got another lineup for Arrow Smuggle Flight. This one's not super precise, just want to get a general angle and launch off these stairs here. And that angle will put us directly in front of the door of the Temple of Time. You'll notice we did take a little bit of fall damage, but we're going to go ahead and tank that because this setup's pretty quick. And we'll be able to heal up at the next shrine anyway, so that shouldn't be a big deal for us. The only real danger we have of dying at this point is if we take fall damage of any kind, which is something that's probably not very likely to happen, as there's from here to the next shrine, there's not really many places that we can fall from. And even if we were to fall, Arrow Smuggle State allows us to do a quick fall damage cancel, so we can actually negate all fall damage from any height with this Arrow Smuggle. So here, we did a little hop there to get right up to the trigger to activate this secret stone here, because actually, a little bit counterintuitively, we can actually activate it from quite a bit far back, but we want to get as close to possible and get that little jump in there, because it gives us a better chance at getting a fast load for this cutscene here for some reason. And it looks like we did get a pretty fast load on that one, so we accomplished our objective with that little skip right there. So now with the last of our abilities, we have to go and try to open the door, even though we already know we're not going to be able to with just 3 hearts instead of the required 4. But what that's going to do for us is unlock fast travel, as we mentioned earlier. So that's going to allow us to head all the way back up to the recall shrine that we ran right past at the beginning of the tutorial section. And here, normally I go for a little bit of a ledge bomb. I mistimed the input, but I was able to save it with some quick thinking and a jump slash there. But we'll be able to see me get it if I can get it on the second time around. But yeah, you notice we'll be continually fusing these bombs to our shield. It's great to just have on hand for performing all sorts of jumps. These bombs are incredibly useful throughout the entire portion of the run. So here's the dialogue we mentioned that's going to unlock fast travel for us. And interestingly enough, so that terminal we mentioned that we skipped by doing cog skip at the very beginning of the run, it actually has this little blue light that pops up that you can see there, that little diamond on the ground, basically to say that you've unlocked it as a fast travel point, right? But since we did cog skip, we didn't actually unlock that. But strangely enough, it turns out that that portal activation is just a cosmetic thing, and the game still very nicely, graciously allows us to fast travel back to the Room of Awakening anyways. So this time, thankfully, we won't have to go through cog skip again. Now that we have bombs, we can just make a quick jump up into the tunnel and continue on our way. Much quicker than cog skip the second time around. If only we had bombs in the very beginning, right? So now we'll just do a little bit more crouch throw sprinting to get to the tunnel here before we make it to Recall Shrine. This is probably one of my favorite shrines, if not my favorite in the run, just because the setup is super fun. And Recall Shrine is actually also on a bit of a tight cycle like Ascend. But the interesting thing is if we miss a cycle, we can actually use a bit of a backup to barely lose any time. So we're going to be doing a quick bomb jump off these stairs here into another arrow fly section to head straight to the top, skipping all these long raft sections where you have to ride it up the waterfall. So we're actually able to get the very earliest possible cycle in the shrine, basically losing no time at all. So there, I actually missed it quite a bit, but here we're going to see our one and only use of Ultra Hand in the run. We can actually glue these clock hands together, barely losing any time except for basically like the menuing we had to do there. So even though I missed the early cycle, we're still barely losing any time here. And now with our last Light of Blessing, we can finally go back and complete the tutorial section. So once we head out here, we're just going to fast travel back to Ultra Hand Shrine and kind of rinse and repeat what we did earlier with that bomb jump off the stairs and such before we head out to finish the Gray Sky Island tutorial section. What's pretty interesting, in Breath of the Wild, there was always talk about trying to skip the paraglider and skipping the Great Plateau and such, but it had such a hard-coded void out trigger that it wasn't possible. What's interesting in Tears of the Kingdom, it actually is not only theoretically but proven possible that you can skip Gray Sky Island without getting all of these things that appear to be necessary for like the quest triggers. However, currently the only setup we have for it takes about 3 hours, and also it requires another save file that's not only beaten Gray Sky Island, but also beaten an entire dungeon beforehand, so it would definitely not be viable for any sort of any percent or speedrun of that category. I seem to have missed my angle here after I had to back up that weird jump there. But yeah, like we were mentioning, it's very interesting that in this game, Gray Sky Island tutorial section can actually be skipped. However, in the speedrun, it's not likely to happen unless we have a category like low percent or something that allows using a save from another file. So here we're going to get that bomb that we missed earlier. Clean jump up there, right through the gap. Fuse our last bomb here, and then we're going to grab this heart container that will allow us to finally open the door and leave the tutorial section, as Nintendo intended. Thankfully, the heart container also heals us here, because actually what's funny is the game doesn't want you to mess around. If you're not at full hearts, you can't open that door and you will die. I have had runs before where for some reason I was just on autopilot and I forgot to grab the heart container and just went straight to open the door, and was very confused as to why Link suddenly, keeled over. But that's something that we usually can avoid by, simply remembering to grab the heart container. So we've got one last cutscene that's thankfully skippable here, and then we've got one more arrow flight to finish off GSI. Going back to those ledge bombs earlier, this is actually a pretty cool tech that we've been playing around with for quite a while, where we actually can drop a wing, another one of the crazy uses of wings, and perform a ledge bomb with a jump off the tip of the nose. That'll give us a perfect angle for a great launch here, much faster than running. And you can see on the mini-map, we're just zooming straight to the little golden light here. And there you have it. That is Gray Sky Island tutorial section complete. And from here, no more funny business. We're just going to head straight directly to the end of the game to show the Demon King what's up. But first then we have to perform this wing flight. So we'll do another shield drop wing here. And like we mentioned before, we don't want to have any downtime basically. So we're going to use this wing flight here to duplicate our rubies. We want around 25 is usually a good number. Sometimes I might get a bit extra in case things go a little bit off plan or off course during the final fight that we have to go through. So we want to make sure our line was pretty good here. It's quite easy to actually lose a lot of time if your wing's off angle, even just a little bit. You'll steal pretty far off course. And we're heading to the castle, to the specific clip spot. If you're familiar with some older routes of this category, you may recognize the famous, or infamous, I should say, well at the castle grounds that we jump through. We actually are skipping this. And this might be a good time to explain what I meant to come back to earlier about draining our arrows. So for arrow flight to work, like I mentioned, you need to be in a state where Link cannot be in bullet time. And that can be achieved by either having no arrows or being out of stamina, right? So we have what's called arrowless or stamina-less. I guess you could say arrow flight. Arrowless is definitely faster because for each setup, we can just immediately perform it instead of having to run around in circles or like perform a little spin attack to drain our arrows. But the reason this clip spot at the balcony that we're going to is so much better than the well clip is there's actually a convenient amount of arrows just sitting right there for us. And the reason we want to grab arrows again is because that'll allow us to perform some skips to clip out of bounds with arrow smuggle, as you'll see in just a second here. I was trying to get some momentum off the wing there to basically do some arrow flight combined with shield jumps to get straight to the balcony. Unfortunately, it looks like I mistimed an input, and I have to do these backup jump slashes here like we've been seeing for the whole run. This is actually another quirk of 1.0. These jump slashes are incredibly quick. You can see I'm getting them out in very rapid succession. These jump slashes do work on all later versions of the game. However, there's kind of more of a cooldown on when you can cancel your dive into another jump slash. So 1.0 definitely has this as an advantage as well. We're able to carry the momentum here. Honestly, this is not that bad of a time loss considering the momentum. And we're going to perform a sleek wall grab, fall damage cancel there. That's actually a glitchless technique that anybody can perform just by grabbing the wall to cancel fall damage. So here's our clip spot. We want to get a little line up here to get that hop. Now 3 hops up, and we're going to enter bullet time and then proceededly perform these inputs for arrow smuggle. And once we get halfway to the ceiling, we're going to do a shield jump. And there we go, to clip out of bounds. And now we can just dive straight down into the depths. We're basically right over the endgame area right now, so we can basically head straight down, which is another perk of the balcony spot that we have here compared to the well, where you kind of have to slow dive and angle a lot further since it's a lot further away from the castle. So now here we have to avoid some invisible and visible geometry here to not fall to our deaths. So we'll dive through here. Another interesting change they made from Breath of the Wild is collision for walls and ceilings and such is two-sided in this game. So here's another fall damage cancel we can perform. So we actually have to clip back in bounds now, and we can do this by using the rune menu to cancel our shield opening, and then we can switch shields. That'll put us into a ragdoll state that'll allow us to clip back in bounds there. It's a very consistent setup there. So now we're going to do one more fall damage cancel into army, and basically we're going to make use of those stones that we collected earlier, those rubies, to make quick work of the army here. I forgot to rank recall ability earlier, but I would probably put it second just for this, because recall is very useful for canceling the animation on these ruby throws, which allowed us to get it out a lot faster. Not only that, but it can also, as you know, it stops time a little bit, which basically holds the monsters in place so we can aggregate them a little bit better and kind of keep our distance for them. It looks like the boss Boko is getting a little bit too close, so I'm kind of concerned here. Yeah, we missed a shot there, which means we're going to have to kind of run away from him a little bit. In this circumstance, I probably want to bait him into doing an attack. There we go. Oh, took some damage there. That's a little worrisome, but having a quarter of heart is okay. We'll be able to make it through the next sections. Okay, we just have to be very, very careful from here on out. So we're not quite done with material grabbing. The other key part of army, besides obviously defeating the enemies, is we want to grab these powerful materials here. So we got this boss Bokoblin horn that we're going to use to fight Ganondorf. Now we got phase 2, which is the Lizalfos. These guys, this is probably the most volatile phase of army here, as their jumps are pretty random, and they can basically head right up in your face like that. So you got to be really careful. Maybe take your time a little bit more with aiming your ruby shots as to not completely hit one of them. And so there we go. We made short work of these. We want to grab the Royal Halberd. Something interesting about the weapon routing in this game is a really cool thing they added to Tears of the Kingdom was different weapon classes have like different perks. The Royal set, like the Royal Halberd, etc., it gives you double damage for a Flurry Rush. And if you're familiar with the final boss Ganondorf, it's basically a Flurry Rush dream. So we're going to be wanting to grab those Royal Halberds for that. Phase 3, the Gibdos here, probably the easiest of the phases. We can just kind of stand around and get some throws in. It just takes 2 shots. So there is a horn that we want to pick up from those Alphos. It seems like it despawned before we had a chance to grab it, but no worries. We can actually just dupe the Bokoblin horn that we grabbed earlier. So last phase here, the Moblins, we can also make short work of them. Nothing too complicated here. The hardest part about Army is grabbing all the items before they despawn, and also just making sure you don't hit yourself with a ruby. So here, normally the game wants us to go through this boss rush because we haven't completed any of the dungeons, right? So we have 6 bosses we need to fight, which is pretty incredibly difficult for the little materials we have. However, it turns out that after you defeat Army, the flag for Ganondorf fight to trigger has just become active. So using our arrow smuggle, which is still active here, we can actually clip out of bounds underneath the floor here and then clip back in past that giant door that's blocking our way to completely skip the entire boss fight, easily shaving 10 plus minutes off the run and a whole ton of weapon routing. So we got the first clip pretty cleanly. Second one, the camera can be a little bit janky here, but looks like we were able to avoid that. We'll do some quick hops here. Clean clip there. That was a pretty close call, actually. As you noticed, the gloom damage was ticking down. I was probably about a nanosecond away from death there, so we got pretty lucky that we were able to get through there so fast. So we'll go ahead and drop those weapons. We won't be needing arrow smuggle anymore from here on out, and we'll just run down this tunnel to Ganondorf. Actually, before we head into the final boss fight, we're going to be seeing one more effect of what we call Zuggle Overload that we had to set up our air smuggle here. And actually, the secret 5th rune, which is the map rune, actually ends up being pretty useful because we can use this glitch called Map Zuggle, which is much quicker than the overload setup that we had in Fuse Shrine, now that we have access to the map rune by completing GSI. We can stack these 4 Royal Halberds in our hand, and then when we fuse a horn to it, that fuse damage will actually apply to all 4 of the halberds that are in our hand. Not to mention the one that's on our back that we're going to draw, so we basically have 5 weapons here. And these will all be doing damage at the same time. All the hitboxes will be active here. So we'll see again in phase 1, bait him into a flurry rush. So we've got our 5 halberds plus the double damage from the Royal Halberd to make quick work of basically melting his health bar. Phase 2 here, there is a little bit of weapon RNG as to what he's going to pull out. We got the spear, which is pretty quick, so nice. But even if we had gotten one of the slower weapons like the club, there's things we can do to mitigate any time loss there. So phase 2, completely easy. Phase 3 here, we've got a little cutscene. I do want to note too, it's very interesting if you're familiar with Breath of the Wild speedruns, how you have to fight Calamity Ganon and then Dark Beast Ganon. How Calamity Ganon is a very intense, super tough fight, and then Dark Beast is basically like, you know, a playable cutscene. But in Tears of the Kingdom, it seems to be reversed. Ganondorf is actually pretty much a walk in the park once you know what to do. Just hit 3 flurry rushes and spam attack, and you're good to go. But the final boss, Demon Dragon, is where the difficulty really cranks up. So we'll go ahead and get in our last hit on Colgera here. I love how since we skipped the bosses, the tagline for Colgera is still up. It doesn't actually switch over to Ganondorf, and we get that cool Colgera theme song that everybody seems to love. So we've got another long load here as the game will take us up into the skies for our climactic final battle against Demon Dragon. At this point in the run, things are getting pretty intense, especially if you're on PV pace. Personally, I consider Demon Dragon fight to be probably the hardest part of the run when you consider the room for error versus the potential time loss that you have. And not only that, but you have to sit through almost 2 full minutes or a minute and a half of loading screens plus cutscenes before you can even start the fight. So I think I'll take some time to explain this now. Oh, but first we can see one funny effect of the Zuggle stacking that we have is the weapon's still active in our hands. So as we pull the Master Sword here, we actually get this Master Royal Boss Boko Horde Halberd sword, this unholy weapon, because the halberd's still glued to our hand, even though we're holding the Master Sword. And actually here, it looks like I made a slight mistake earlier when I threw my tree branch. I was supposed to just drop it from my inventory. So actually, the game is still a little bit overloaded, which is not good because I won't be able to use the weapon that's in my hand as the weapon is kind of desynced right now. So before we actually get into the fight, I'm going to have to make sure I drop that weapon very quickly, which actually is not that big of a deal because we want to drop the weapon anyway, as it does pretty inconsistent damage with the Master Sword, as the Master Sword is pretty much the only weapon that can effectively hit Demon Dragon here, basically for, you know, lore purposes or whatever. But yeah, basically what we're going to do here is attempt what's called a 2-cycle Demon Dragon. Obviously we didn't get the paraglider. We're going to have to rely on all the movement tech at our disposal to try to get to those eyes, those 4 weak points, as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do here is kind of line up. I like to line up with that sphere in the background. So we'll jump off here, and now this is where I got to make sure I drop my weapons before we get any much further. So you can see all those halberds dropping. Now we switch back to the Master Sword. Now we can go ahead and perform these jump slash chains again, which will hopefully precisely land us right by the first eye. So there we go. And now we can make some hits here. After each eye, the dragon likes to launch you out. So we use that to our advantage to get into a dive and pull out a wing with a little bit of flash there to get on the wing. And now after hitting the second eye, what we want to do is jump down and get back on Zelda for the next phase. Unfortunately, I missed that jump there, and so we ended up being a bit slow. So we're not going to be able to get the fastest cycle that we want. However, fortunately, I do have some pretty decent backups for this point. So instead of a 2-cycle, we'll be able to get basically a 3-cycle, hopefully, here. So normally at this point, we'd want to jump off Zelda and The momentum would put us right by the third eye. However, since I was just even a bit late there, unfortunately we're going to miss it. So we can perform a shield jump here to get on a wing to give us a little bit of steering to get to the third eye here. As I mentioned, this is definitely one of the most difficult parts of the run, and being at the very end of the run, especially if you can imagine you're on PB pace, or God forbid world record pace, and it comes down to getting clean execution here on the Demon Dragon fight, it can be pretty stressful, so the nerves can really get to you. This is, out of everything in the run, this is probably what I've tried to practice the most. But unfortunately, it's also one of the most difficult to practice, because to even get to this fight, you have to go through all of Army and then fight Ganon, do those out of bounds clips, and then get back to fighting Ganondorf just to get here. So once you're here, if you want to practice, basically you just gotta die and reset over and over until you get it down. It's pretty tough to practice. So unfortunately, we didn't quite get the optimal backup, but looks like we still made it to the last eye in pretty decent time. So we're in pretty good shape here, still to snag a PB. We'll just get down back to Zelda as quickly as possible and ride her all the way to the top. And from there, we'll just jump down and go in for the final hit. I will go ahead and note now. Here's another one of these weird quirks throughout the entire run, even up to the end. We're still explaining all the weird quirks of version 1.0. So for the very final hit on Demon Dragon, if you're for some reason if you're standing on his head, you just get an extra 8 seconds of load, basically out of nowhere. So it's basically an 8-second time loss. But what we can do is, normally if we're at full health, we can do a backflip or a side hop and use the Master Sword beam that it shoots out for the final hit, so we can be kind of in the air. Unfortunately, since we're still at a quarter of a heart from getting smacked by the boss Poco earlier, we're going to have to perform a side slash. But if I can get in a couple times, I usually just go for the hit and take the time loss anyways, as I don't want to play around too much. Yeah, we missed it there, but we got the final hit in. So we're going to get this 8-second load screen here, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not too big of a deal. And Dragon was clean enough that we're going to still be able to snag a PB. Run's definitely not over yet. We've still got one more thing to do, which is dive down and catch the princess. So we got this cutscene here where we're going to have to make the final strike on Demon Dragon. Super cool, super cinematic. One reason I love the speedrun so much is it turns up the heat all the way from start to finish. And personally, I think the ending to Tears of the Kingdom is one of the coolest we've had for any Zelda game so far. So I always enjoy watching this part here. However, these next two cutscenes, we don't really want to be watching them right now. We've got one last final business here, which is a dive down to Zelda. And I think we can still see one last effect from our overload. Yep, we still got that wooden bow on our back from earlier. Normally the game wants to remove everything from your equipped slots except the Master Sword, but since we've still got that glued to our back, it's going to persist through basically this playable cutscene here. So all we got to do from here on is just hold R, dive down to Zelda, wait for our opportunity to catch her, and time will end once we hold hands with the princess. I've got the audio muted here, but I just love the music swell here and everything. Super cinematic, super cool. As we go ahead and finish off our run. And there you go. That is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Any Percent Speedrun in just under 48 minutes. That's good enough for about top 25 on the leaderboard, and for no amiibo, which is the category that I prefer to run, we almost broke into the top 10 with that run. So I was definitely pretty happy with that overall. Definitely, there could have been a lot of things that were cleaned up. I had to take a bit of extra time for some of our Arrow Smuggle lineups, and then Demon Dragon was probably the weakest part of the run that specific time, but overall I'm definitely very happy with how that went. So there you have it. There's my commentary analysis for my most recent personal best for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Thank you for watching, and if you're interested in checking out some more Tears of the Kingdom speedruns, definitely take a look at some of our leaderboards on speedrun.com, or feel free to join our Discord as well. Thank you so much for watching.